بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. اللهم وجهنا لما خلقتنا له واصرفنا عما نهيتنا عنه ولا تشغلنا بما تكفلت لنا به. اللهم اجعلنا من جند الخير، دلنا عليك، ارشدنا إليك، فهمنا عنك، علمنا منك، واعذنا من مضلات الفتن ما أحيتنا. اللهم أعز الإسلام بنا اللهم أعزنا بالإسلام وأعز الإسلام بنا واجعله حجة لا علينا واجعلنا حجة له لا عليه. I stole the introduction from a sheikh on YouTube, but I liked it. طيب, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inshallah, we're going to start episode 1 of our series on Hadith and its sciences. Of course, the sciences of Hadith are like a vast ocean, and it is very easy to drown if you don't have, I guess, the correct toolkit to traverse said oceans. And I think before getting too deep into it, there are some things that are very important for everyone to know. And part of the sciences of Hadith, or Hadith itself, the topic of Hadith, part of it is relevant to each and every Muslim. And some of it, I guess, might be specific to the students of knowledge. And one common issue that I found with the way that Hadith is taught is that usually introductory series to Hadith, they always start with Mustalah al-Hadith or Hadith terminology. And for many people, that's, of course, it's useful, it's beneficial, but there are, I think, things that are more pertinent to the everyday Muslim, things that are more befitting. I guess there are more befitting starting points. So inshallah, today we're going to start by just talking about, I guess, the history of Hadith and how we got to where we are, and all these books that we have. I have Sahih al-Bukhari here with me right now. I guess I'll show it. Show it to the people on Zoom. Sahih al-Bukhari, one edition. How did we get this book that has over 7,500 narrations? And why is this book considered the most authentic book after the Book of Allah? And of course, there's no comparison between any book and the Book of Allah. How did we get here? Why do we trust these ahadith? These are some questions that we hope to answer today. Next episode, we're going to be talking about, and it's not going to be me, inshallah. Next episode, we're bringing Ustad Sayyid Hassan, our beloved Ustad. He's going to be talking about the Hujjiyat al-Sunnah, like the authority of the Sunnah. So a lot of misconceptions that, and maybe even the questions that you guys have, keep in mind that next week's lecture will be focused on proving the authority of the Sunnah and why it is important, and why we derive rulings and a lot of the rulings. Why do we derive rulings from it? And what makes it a legitimate source of legislation after the Quran? Because of course you have a lot of people who call themselves Qur'aniyin, who only take from the Quran and refuse or reject the Sunnah. So that lecture will be addressing many of them, and of course will be reinforcing our conviction as Muslims. طيب. I want to start, I always like starting with a quote, and this quote is from Al-Farabri, the student of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah. He said, I'm gonna say the Arabic, the English is on the board. He says, أملى البخاري علي حديثا كثيرا ذات يوم فخشي ملالي أو فخاف ملالي فقال طب نفسا فأهل الملاهي في ملاهيهم وأهل الصناعة في صناعتهم وأهل التجارة في تجارتهم وأنت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه. Bukhari, one day he dictated a large amount of hadith to Al-Farabri, and he feared that his student has gotten tired. So he said, the people of amusements are absorbed in their amusements, and the craftsmen are in their crafts, and the merchants in their trade, while you are in the company of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. And then his student replied, there is nothing in any of that, may Allah have mercy on you, that I deem more fortunate for myself than what I am doing now. First of all, I thank ChatGPT for this translation. But subhanAllah, this is something that if you read the biographies of these scholars, a lot of them will have a similar statement. Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah, the famous companion the famous scholar who died in 181. He's also a scholar of hadith and among many other sciences. And he would spend a lot of time at home. And they told him, don't you get lonely? And he said, how can I be lonely when I'm with the Prophet and his companions? So this is, I guess, by showing up here, I first want to congratulate you. Alhamdulillah, there are many things that one can be doing on a Friday afternoon. So alhamdulillah, and it's a good sign that we're here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us, and may Allah make this a beneficial session for all of us. myself included. Myself first and foremost. طيب, so this is a simple table of content. There are many different stages between the Prophet ﷺ and the time of the major compilations of Hadith. So I split it into 5 sections. So during the time of the Prophet, after his death, during the time of the companions, then after the companions died, the Tabi'een, and then after the Tabi'een died, all the way until the mid 3rd century. That's when the mid to late 3rd century, that's when Sahih al-Bukhari and many of the other books of Hadith that we use today, that's when they were compiled. So we're going to go from the very beginning until we get to that point, inshallah. So introduction. Why learn this? I want to, I guess, raise that question to you guys. Why are the sciences of Hadith important? What do we hope to learn, and why are we learning this? Yes, Amar. Okay, he says Islamic rulings, a lot of them are derived from Hadith, and we need context. As I was saying, yeah. Not just Islamic rulings. If you look at all the Islamic sciences, all of them need Hadith. Any other reasons? Yes, Murad. Yes. A lot of people reject or attack Hadith as a source of knowledge. It is very important to reinforce or have that conviction and be able to dispel any doubts, any myths, any lies that people spread or any circulate around Hadith. And that, unfortunately, has become very rampant in this day and age. Anything else? Yes, sister. Increase our faith. Yes, increase our faith. Yes. Let me. I have some here. So I mentioned the first one. Murad mentioned the strengthen the conviction, dispel misconceptions, or maybe like it's a combination of what you two said. It is a gateway to all the Islamic sciences, as I mentioned. If you want to learn Quran, you open a book of tafsir. Guess what? It's going to be filled with ahadith, because the primary source for tafsir that we have is what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Like, how did he interpret the ayah? If that's not available, what did the companions say? All of those, they're transmitted to us through hadith. Understand how to deal with hadith we come across. So that has to do with understanding the matan, the content of the hadith. And also the ability to read earlier books. I mentioned that because a lot of the contemporary books, they almost make it to, there's too much abstraction. Like this book, for example. I mean, like books like that are written, I guess contemporary books or even later books, like past the 4th or 5th century, they start to build upon the books that were written or compiled in these first few centuries. And these, so to be able to access the knowledge and the information in these earlier books, you need to understand the san'a, like the trade or like the art of hadith. And I say it's an art because, and for reasons that we'll get into today, inshallah. But a lot of these books, they rely heavily on hadith and the isnad and the narrations. So it is very important to have some level of understanding of how that works if you want to benefit from these works. Like Tafsir al-Tabari, for example. We hear that Tafsir al-Tabari is one of the greatest tafsirs ever written. That Tabari is Imam al-Mufassirin. You open his tafsir, it's all narrations. Same with a lot of the history books. Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya by Ibn Kathir, for example. Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, you open it, and they Bidayah wa Nihaya, for those who don't know it, it's a book. It's called Al-Bidayah because Ibn Kathir starts by talking about the beginning of creation, and Al-Nihaya is because he ends the book with the Day of Judgment, the things that will happen on the Day of Judgment. And of course, he goes all the way up until his time. Ibn Kathir died in the 8th century, so it goes up all the way up until the, I guess, end of the 7th century, beginning of the 8th century. If you open those books, you'll find that they're filled with narrations. So all the books that we read now, that the history books, tafsir, they take that content and they simplify it for us because we're masakin and we don't have the tools to be able to engage with those books. So anyone who has that desire to go back to the main sources, you need a good understanding of the of hadith. I recognize the beauty of the science and the strict critical process that Hadith went through. You'll see how, and we don't just accept a Hadith just because Bukhari narrated it. I mean, who's Imam Bukhari? Yani, or like you can ask the question, do we accept the Hadith because Bukhari narrated it, or do we? No, actually, let me forget that one. But yeah, we don't just accept it just because a certain individual said it. Yani, the reason why we respect a certain individual is because they went through that stringent process and they passed with flying colors. That's why we have that high reverence for the people who authored some of these books. Does anyone know who Mustafa Sabri is? Mustafa Sabri? Okay, it seems like you know. The Turkish Sheikh. I like that. Yeah, Mustafa Sabri was the last Sheikh al-Islam. Sheikh al-Islam was a title that the Ottoman Empire would give to the Mufti, to the Grand Mufti. So Istanbul, the Mufti of Istanbul, the Mufti of the Ottoman Empire, they would give him the title of Sheikh al-Islam. So Mustafa Sabri is actually the last Sheikh al-Islam of the Ottoman Empire before it fell. And then he fled to Egypt. And the story of how he got to Egypt and what he did in Egypt is very interesting. If anyone's interested, I recommend you look him up. But Mustafa Sabri, he said that the critical efforts in Hadith sciences are among the miracles of Islam. And really the efforts that the scholars went through to make sure that this Hadith is accurately, precisely narrated to us, it is a miracle. And you'll see why. And honestly, if you look at the previous nations, if you look at the previous religions, previous faiths, it's going to become a lot easier to understand that, because even if you look at the way that the Bible was transmitted, for example, and you compare that to a narration that we would consider weak, you'll find that our weak narrations are more authentic than the chain of narration of the Bible. Funny enough. And the last point I put is enjoying reading the narration chains. Like when you say, حدثنا, like the first hadith in Bukhari, حدثنا الحميدي عبد الله بن الزبير عن سفيان بن عيينة عن يحيى بن سعيد الأنصاري عن محمد إبراهيم التيمي عن علقمة بن وقاص الليثي عن like if you study the science of hadith and you start recognizing these names, and you might think it's a lot of work right now, but I will say something that one of the teachers that I studied under through YouTube, he's not my teacher, but he mentioned that anyone who tells you that it's very hard to remember all these names, ask them about the formation of Barcelona and Real Madrid and Manchester United and Chelsea and Atletico and Milan and Bayern. SubhanAllah, they know all these players. And they're not even putting in active efforts. It's just something. Why? Because they're interested in it. And that honestly, at that point, that put me to shame, because I know like not only Barcelona, Real Madrid, I knew like half the La Liga formations. I was obsessed with soccer. So and that's why I don't know, like that really resonated with me. Or anyone, like if you're a student of, if you're a medical student, if you're a pharmacy student, if you're a I don't know, like I'm trying to think of a history student, any all these professions, like if it's something that you need to learn, I guess, to make a living, like you'll go through the trouble. So why not do it for the sake of your religion? Anyways, I spent too much time on this. Let's get started with the actual content. So I guess I have some questions here. So during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, what was the primary mode of transmission? How did the Prophet, first of all, teach his companions, and how did the companions spread the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ among themselves? Yes. Sorry? Orally, yes, orally. So the Arabs were ummiyin, unlettered, like they were not able to read and write for the most part. However, oral transmission was something that was deeply ingrained in their societies, and that's because they had strong memories. If you look at the rich heritage of poetry, and the Arabs, your average Arab would know like hundreds or thousands of lines of poetry. Again, because that's something that they were interested in. And many of them would, even before Islam, they would hear a poem once and they would memorize the whole thing. So the concept of having, like the Arabs had very strong memories. They were well known for that. That being said, some of them did read and write. So I guess my next question, when did Muslims start writing down hadith? During the time of the Prophet ﷺ? Okay, do you have any examples? No? Okay. Yes, Murad.
Be a little bit scratch, but I think it was Handala, no, sorry, Huzaifa would I think write things down, right? I think he was given writings.
I don't know if he wrote hadith, but maybe. The most famous example is the example of Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As. Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As, he would write everything. The Prophet ﷺ would say, to the point where Quraysh started criticizing him. They told him that the Prophet ﷺ is a human being. He makes mistakes, he gets angry. So then he mentioned that to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet said, "Uktub فوالذي نفسي بيده ما يخرج منه إلا حق." He said, write for by the one whom my soul is in his hands, yani by Allah, nothing comes out of this except the truth. So even if I'm angry, nothing will come out of my mouth except for the truth. And there are many other examples where the Prophet ﷺ would let companions write. And that's important because there's a very famous hadith by Sahih Muslim, so it's an authentic hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تكتبوا عني ومن كتب عني شيء غير القرآن فليمحه. Don't write after me. Whoever writes anything other than the Quran, let them erase it. So that's a very common misconception. That's a very common hadith. Like, that's a hadith that people will bring up a lot. I think I have a slide for that, so I'm not going to mention the reasoning or how we, I guess, answer that hadith based on the other narrations that we have. But I will say here is that yani, a lot of the misconceptions that people bring up is that the hadith was not written down until 200 years or 300 years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And the first thing you say is, who says like written transmission is the best way to, and even if you think about Aristotle, like the Greeks or the from previous nations. I know their stuff was written, but also a lot of the stuff reached orally, and no one questioned their authenticity. And if you trace back, when did this obsession with having to have written documentation of something come about? It's only recent, I think 18th or 19th century. Before that, people would widely accept oral transmission. And we'll see why that's the case again as we move forward. The last thing I put here is there's a variation in the transmission style, even among the major hadith narrator companions. So for example, Abu Huraira and Ibn Umar, they would narrate, they had different styles of narration. So Abu Huraira, as you guys all know probably, or most of you know, Abu Huraira is the companion who narrated the most hadith out of everyone, or out of all the companions. And part of the reason behind that is that Abu Huraira would try to narrate everything that he heard. Like, he would go out of his way to narrate. Like, even before Jum'ah prayer, it was recorded or reported that Abu Huraira would go up to the minbar before the khatib comes, and he would start narrating a hadith to all the companions and all the tabi'een. So Abu Huraira was someone who's very keen on transmitting as much of the hadith that he knew to the Muslim population. Ibn Umar, on the other hand, was very cautious. He would only narrate a hadith if he had to. Like, if there's a situation that calls for it, that's when he was going to narrate. And yet you'll find that Ibn Umar also narrated a lot of hadith, and that's because people would ask him a lot of questions. But you will find that, of course, this is one of the reasons why Abu Huraira has narrated a lot more hadith than others. And even Aisha radiallahu anha, she criticized Abu Huraira's style. It was like, wallahi, the Prophet did not do what you're doing. But of course, that's a criticism of the style, not of the content. Aisha radiallahu anha was very approving of the content that was transmitted. And actually, the fact that Abu Huraira would the fact that Abu Huraira would narrate these ahadith in public further proves that his ahadith just adds to the authenticity of his ahadith. Because if he said something wrong, imagine in Medina, all the companions were still there, they would have corrected him. So that's actually a point for Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. طيب. I have this slide here because we're going to get into a lot of names. It's going to might be a bit overwhelming. So I want to start with something that, and I want to set some common ground. First of all, who is a companion? There are differences of opinion regarding what constitutes a companion, or when can someone be considered a companion. I just compiled the most famous opinions because this could be a whole discussion on its own, and it's not really the point of this lecture. So Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani is very famous because he wrote the most famous commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. So he said a companion is one who met the Prophet ﷺ believing in him and dies upon Islam. So that does not include people who apostated. So anyone who met the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't really stipulate a time and a certain duration, basically. Imam al-Bukhari himself, in his Sahih, he actually gives a definition of a companion. He said, whoever accompanied the Prophet ﷺ or seen him from the Muslims is from the companions. The Usulis, though, most of the Usulis are the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh, like Islamic legal theory or principles of jurisprudence. They did stipulate a length of companionship, and that length is governed by urf, like urf is, how do you translate urf? Like common status quo, yeah, by status quo. And some scholars made a distinction between the companions. There's the general companions, so any Muslim who was confirmed to see and meet the Prophet ﷺ, and that includes, because if you were to include any Muslim who saw the Prophet ﷺ, then you'd have to include over 100,000 people who attended the farewell sermon and the farewell pilgrimage, and that's a lot of companions. Even though most of them probably didn't even speak to the Prophet ﷺ, they just saw him. And then, so that's one distinction of a general companion. And then there's another one, which is one of the Prophet ﷺ's companions, whom the many virtues apply to, having championed the Prophet ﷺ. Do you want to raise your hand?
Does this include seeing the Prophet in your dream?
I don't want to comment. Maybe there's an opinion regarding it, but if it's not mentioned in any of the, because that, I mean, then someone from today could be a companion, which is a bit far-fetched. Go ask a sheikh, but I highly doubt it. طيب. So this opinion, so yeah, the people who were like with the Prophet ﷺ through thick and thin, the people who the verses of the Quran were revealed about, those were the special, or the companions that the virtues apply to, and that's the opinion that is championed by Ibn al-Jawzi. Ibn al-Jawzi is the Hanbali scholar, Baghdadi Hanbali scholar who died 597. Muhammad Taqi Uthmani is a contemporary Hanafi scholar, and Ibn Abd al-Barr, who's a Maliki scholar who died in 463 in Andalus. So that's a very common opinion. But even if you stick to Bukhari and Ibn Hajar, and you just very simple, I just wanted to mention that because we're going to be, this is very important, knowing who a companion is, because you're going to have to defend the companions, because the whole hadith heritage depends on the companions being trustworthy. Why do I have this up? Oh yeah. So many of the companions died early, and most of the companions who narrated a lot of hadith had later deaths. This makes sense. So if you look at the companions who narrated the most hadith, a lot of them lived longer after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. 7 narrated over 1,000 hadith. Can we guess who they are? I know Abu Hurairah is the first. So, sorry? Aisha, yeah. Actually, I think it's 5374. This is a typo. Should be 5374. If anyone cares. Yeah, Aisha is one of them. Abu Hurairah, Aisha, yeah. Huh? Ibn Mas'ud, no, he's not from the 7, but he's close. Abdullah bin Umar, yes. She mentioned Aisha. Guys, there's 7. Come on. No. So who? Zayd? No, Zayd died during Mu'tah. Ibn Abbas, yes, that's one of them, yeah. So who do we have? Ibn Umar, do you say Anas bin Malik, yes. Asma, no. He's a famous Madani companion who was young. I don't know if that helps. You know him. You guys know him. You just طيب خلاص. Mu'adh? No, not Mu'adh. Mu'adh died early. Mu'adh died 18 after Hijrah, huh? Zayd, no, Zayd died. Are you talking about Zayd bin Thabit? Oh, no. No, Zayd, no. A clue? I gave you a clue. He is young. Okay, the famous story of him selling his camel to the Prophet ﷺ. He sold his camel. Oh, yeah, the Prophet bought his camel. Then he gave him the money and he let him keep the camel. He was walking from Banu Mustaliq. Jabir bin Abdullah. Jabir bin Abdullah. And the last one is Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. I don't think you guys will get that one, but so Ibn Umar is the second most. Remember how we said we contrasted the styles of Abu Huraira and Ibn Umar? By the way, Abu Huraira, it's interesting how he narrated the most ahadith. When did Abu Huraira embrace Islam? When did he meet the Prophet ﷺ? Seventh year after the Battle of Khaybar. So he had 3 years to live with the Prophet ﷺ. But Abu Huraira, he dedicated, all his time, he spent it with the Prophet ﷺ. He would follow him everywhere. And as we mentioned before, he was very keen on spreading that knowledge, and we'll mention why he did that. He says why he was so keen on spreading the knowledge. So Aisha was the third, Ibn Abbas was the fourth, Jabir was the fifth, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri was the sixth. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I missed one. Oh, I forgot to put Anas bin Malik. Anas had, I think Anas was fourth. Yeah, Anas had like 200, or third or fourth. I think he was third actually. He had just a little bit over Aisha, radiallahu anha. Guys, by the way, I put the death years next to every name that I could because it's very helpful to know when someone died. It helps you contextualize. Someone once asked me, like, because I told him my two favorite scholars are Shafi'i and Ibn Taymiyyah. He's like, did they meet? I almost had a minute because like they're 500 years apart. But if you don't really care about that stuff, you want to know. Anyways, and then close, I think one of you mentioned Ibn Mas'ud. So Ibn Mas'ud, because he died early, he didn't narrate as many ahadith. And also Ibn Mas'ud was very cautious. Ibn Mas'ud, when he really did not like to narrate. And when he would narrate a hadith, he said, أو نحو من ذلك أو شيء من ذلك. So he would say the hadith, and he would say, or something like this, or something close to this. So he was very, very cautious. And Abdullah bin Amr as well did not narrate much. Baqi bin Makhlad. So these numbers are from Musnad Baqi bin Makhlad. Baqi bin Makhlad is an Andalusian scholar who made a Musnad where he compiled more than 38,000 ahadith. And a Musnad is a hadith compilation that is ordered based on the companion. So Musnad Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and all the hadith that were narrated by Abu Bakr, then Umar, then Uthman, then Ali. So it would just be, that's how it would be organized. So each chapter has a name of a companion and all the narrations by that companion. And that makes it very easy to go to those books and I guess count how many hadith did that companion narrate. Unfortunately for us, Musnad Baqi bin Makhlad is lost. We don't have access to it anymore. A lot of these numbers we know because people cited it from his book, but we don't actually have his book. طيب. Sorry? Oh, yes. Does he include weak hadiths? Yes. Every hadith you can find, yes. So there's difference, like if you look at a sahih, so for example, Imam Ahmed, his Musnad, Imam Ahmed also has a Musnad. So it's the same category. Like Imam Ahmed, do you think he would not be able to make a compilation that's only authentic? He would be able to, but that was not his goal behind making his Musnad. So it depends on the goal of the compiler. Some compilers, their goal was to only narrate the hadith that they thought they deemed to be authentic. Others, their goal was to just narrate as many hadith as possible. Yes. Sorry? Why didn't they narrate that many? Several reasons. Number one, they're too busy with politics. Number two, they died early as well. So it really depends. Each companion, some companions, and by the way, Umar ibn Khattab, and so there's also another thing. We're talking only about hadith. There's also the fiqh aspect. So a lot of the companions, if you look at Ibn Hazm and Ibn Qayyim after him in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, they would classify. They would Ibn Hazm, I think he narrated ijma' that about 130 companions gave fatwa, and then he would organize them like mukthirin. So the companions that would give a lot of fatawa, and the companions who would give less, and the companions who barely gave any, or like the middle. So some of the companions that didn't narrate as much ahadith, you'll find their names in the mukthirin of the fatwa, like Umar bin Khattab, like Ali bin Abi Talib. They gave a lot of fatwas, especially Ali because he was a judge. You had a question? So I cannot hear. I'm so sorry. Oh, yeah. I forgot to add him. Anas bin Malik. He died in the year 93. I don't know if you care about the years, but yeah. Anas bin Malik. Yeah, we'll get to them in more depth. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide just for an interest of time, but we'll talk about them a bit more. Oh, another thing, companions in Medina would naturally narrate more than for their cities. Where did I put that? Trying to think. I don't know. Which of the above names actually stayed in Medina? I'll make it easier for you. Anas bin Malik went to Basra. So Anas bin Malik, like don't worry about him. Yes, I forgot to add him, but also he didn't stay. So from these names, any yes. Yeah. Okay. I'll make it easier. Out of these names, most of them stayed in Medina. Who did not stay in Medina? Yes. No, Abu Sa'id is Medina. Who was Ibn Mas'ud? Yeah, Ibn Mas'ud went to Kufa, so he left. But okay, the Meccan school of tafsir. Who's the Sheikh of the Meccan school of tafsir? Who's the faqih of Mecca? Like the companion who went to Mecca to teach fiqh. You should know this. Yeah, Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas went to Mecca. Ibn Mas'ud went to Kufa, and Anas bin Malik went to Basra. And most of the others they stayed in Medina. That's why you'll see that most of the narrations are in Medina. And when you go back and look at the narrations, you'll find that a lot of them are in Medina. I think I mentioned this. Yeah, okay, so see, I fixed the typo here. It should be 5374. The hadith of Abu Huraira, he narrated the most ahadith, 326 in Bukhari, 93 in Muslim, sorry, 326 ahadith of Abu Huraira are in both Bukhari and Muslim, 93 in Bukhari alone, 98 in Muslim alone. Why did he narrate so many ahadith? There's a hadith from him here in Sahih Muslim. Basically, he says that if it weren't for these two ayat, I would have not narrated anything. And these two ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah are إن الذين يكتمون ما أنزلنا من البينات والهدى من بعد ما بيناه للناس في الكتاب أولئك يلعنهم الله ويلعنهم اللاعنون إلا الذين تابوا وأصلحوا وبينوا فأولئك أتوب عليهم وأنا التواب الرحيم. Those who hide clear proofs and guidance that we have revealed after we had made it clear for humanity in the book will be condemned by Allah and all those who condemn. As for those who repent, mend their ways and let the truth be known. They are the ones to whom I will turn in forgiveness, for I am the acceptor of repentance, the most merciful. Yes. So this is why Abu Huraira was so keen. He was struck by these verses. He was very afraid that he might fall into this. If he had any knowledge and he hid it and he did not share it, he was afraid of falling into the ayah. Like, why did the companions teach hadith? Religious obligation to convey, as we mentioned. Prophet ﷺ even commanded them to do so. And you know the hadith, بلغوا عني ولو آية. Actually, let me just pull the hadith up. So this hadith I put ليبلغ الشاهد الغائب. This is in the farewell sermon. The Prophet ﷺ said, let the present, yes, it is incumbent upon those who are present to inform those who are absent, because those who are absent might comprehend what I have said better than the present audience. That's one. Another one here. Oh, I love this hadith. This hadith by Malik ibn al-Huwayrith is Malik ibn al-Huwayrith, yeah. This hadith is very nice, especially for the MSA. I think this is a very like MSA hadith. The Prophet ﷺ, he's okay. Let me just read the English. We came to the Prophet ﷺ and we were a few young men of approximately equal age, and we stayed with him for 20 nights. Then he thought that we are anxious for our families, and he asked us whom we had left behind to look after our families, and we told him. He was kind-hearted and merciful. كان حليما رحيما. And so he said, اذهبوا إلى أهليكم فعلموهم ومروهم. Return to your families and teach them religious knowledge and order them to do good deeds and offer your prayers in the way that you saw me offering my prayers. And when the stated time for the prayer becomes due, then one of you should pronounce its call, and the eldest of you should lead you in prayer. This I will leave to a hadith, sorry, to a fiqh class. This is not like the most knowledgeable in the book of in Tajweed specifically. Like this is a fiqh discussion, but I love this hadith because it's the Prophet ﷺ is like he got a bunch of young youth, and they stayed with him. And imagine you do a camp with the Prophet ﷺ. And after the camp, the Prophet said, go back to your families and teach them. So he's commanding them, like, this knowledge that I gave you, go and spread it. And there's the famous narration, نضر الله امرئا سمع منا مقالة فبلغها كما سمعها فرب مبلغ أوعى بها من سامع أو رب حامل فقه ليس بفقيه ورب حامل فقه إلى من هو أفقه منه. So the Prophet said, may Allah brighten the face of the one who heard something from us and then he transmitted it or narrated it as he has heard it. For you never know, sometimes the one who listens might be more knowledgeable or more understanding of it than the one who narrates. So Allah basically, so the Prophet ﷺ basically made the dua for the person. May Allah brighten their face. And of course, you guys know بلغوا عني ولو آية, right, guys? بلغوا عني ولو آية, convey from me even if it's one ayah. وحدثوا عن بني إسرائيل ولا حرج. So there are many ahadith where the Prophet ﷺ commands the companions. And by the way, the commands of the Prophet ﷺ, they reach the companions, and through the companions they reach us. So those commands extend to us. And this is why we do da'wah. And this is why it is a huge act of worship to spread this knowledge ourselves. طيب. Yes, and the companions even narrated things that you wouldn't want people to know about you. Like Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, he narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, he called him weak. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told Abu Dharr, you're not fit for leadership, you're weak. And he narrated it, لا تأمرن على اثنين, like even if you're two people, don't take leadership. Or the hadith where he told him, إنك امرئ فيك جاهلية, like you still have semblances of jahiliyyah, where he called someone's mother, like a son of the black. So, or the story of Ka'ab bin Malik. Ka'ab bin Malik, he mentions the very long hadith in Bukhari. He mentions it to his own son, basically of how he was, and he procrastinated, and he missed the ghazwa, and the verses were revealed. These are things that you wouldn't want to spread about yourselves, but because they felt that religious obligation, because they had that deep desire for people to benefit from their experiences. And this actually further proves their trustworthiness. And the companions would also not shy away from narrating a hadith that paint them in a negative image, let's say, even though we think nothing bad of them. Can we really trust the companions? I mentioned the first point, proving their trustworthiness is crucial to preserving the Sharia. And their trustworthiness is more important than the strength of memory, because strength of memory, that you can track, you can compare, you can sometimes choose certain narrations over others. And this will become even more prominent after the time of the companions. Trustworthiness guarantees never lying, never making mistakes. So the companions did make mistakes in narration, and these mistakes we have documented. So we know when the companions made mistakes. Did they make mistakes that we don't know of? Yeah, possible. But even if they did, there would be very few, and they would not be in the major, branches of Sharia, because if they made a mistake in that, then definitely they would have been corrected, and you'll see why. And during the conflict among them, so during for example, the time of Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, the companions, they could have easily, any of the camps, so the camp of Muawiyah, the camp of Ali bin Abi Talib, they could have easily fabricated a hadith to strengthen their position, and they would have probably gone away with it, but no one did that. If you read the story of the battles between Aisha and Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhuma, if you read the battle between Ali and Muawiyah, neither side cited a hadith, except the hadith of Ammar bin Yasir, تقتله الفئة الباغية. That's the only hadith, and that hadith was just, that was accepted by both camps. So even the other camp, Muawiyah, he accepted that hadith, he just interpreted that hadith differently. And it's never been documented that a companion lied about a hadith. Any questions about this, actually? Because this is a very... you raise your hand first.
So they asked, for those that might have apostated and came back to the faith, is that taken into account in strength of the narration, or for example, trustworthiness, perhaps?
To be honest, I don't know of a companion that apostated and came back. Do you know of an example?
I know one, I think, but
that narrated hadith.
That came back to the Prophet.
Yeah, and has narrations. Okay, question? That's what I'm saying. That's why they would get away with it. But we have يعني the Quran itself, يعني Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says يعني the companions who attended بيعة بيعة الرضوان or بيعة الموت, like the Hudaybiyah, the companions that attended that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the Quran said that He is pleased with them. Or even further so, like the companions who went to the Battle of Tabuk, there was about 30,000 companions, and every يعني Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again in Surah Al-Tawbah, He also mentions that He's pleased with them. And يعني there's no way that Allah will be pleased with a companion that would then go and lie about the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. Also, if you look at the narrations of the companions, especially like Ka'b bin Malik, we mentioned him. He mentioned like the hypocrites were well known. The hypocrites were well known, and we'll get into examples where the companions would not lie, but even still, يعني other companions would correct them, and then they'd say, "I know they're not lying, but they've made a mistake." So you had the Hadith police, even from the time of the companions. It is very hard to completely fabricate a Hadith, especially about Has anyone ever lied about Hadith? Oh, yes, a lot of people lied about Hadith. But in the time of the companions, not a single companion lied about Hadith. Of course, you had people who claimed prophethood. You have people who claim to receive revelation. It's even worse. So you had liars at that time. Oh, this is very loud. You had liars at that time, but not from the companions whom the Hadith reached us. Okay? And I think this will help us understand it a bit better. So let's narrow this down a bit. So how many companions narrated Hadith? Over 1,500 companions. So not all the companions narrated the Hadith. And if they did not, they didn't reach us. Over 1,500 companions narrated the Hadith. Dr. Akram Diya al-Umari, I love him. He's from Mosul. He's contemporary. He's Iraqi. Yeah, so he actually has a book called Sirah al-Nabawiyya al-Sahiha. It's a book of Sirah that only focuses on authentic narrations. Of course, in Sirah, you don't have to limit yourself to authentic narrations, but there are books that focus on that. And I would say they're a very good foundation. Like if you read that and then you can go and read the bigger Sirah works, is very beneficial. Anyways, he says 2/3 of the Ahadith in Musnad Ahmed. Musnad Ahmed, by the way, I said is a very huge, I don't know if I said that, but Musnad Imam Ahmed. So Imam Ahmed has a Musnad, and we mentioned how Musnad is a compilation of Ahadith ordered by companions. So it starts with the Ashra al-Mubashshareen, and then he does Al al-Bayt, and then he does like alphabetical. So each companion and the Ahadith that they narrated, and it has over 28,000 narrations. Like this is Sahih al-Bukhari. I have in one volume. I have the other 8 books. All of them are 1 volume each. Musnad al-Imam Ahmed is 51 volumes. The same edition as the one I have. It's huge. It has almost 30,000 hadith. And a lot of, actually, most of the hadith in Bukhari and many of the other major compilations, you'll find them in Musnad Imam Ahmed. So that's why he is using that as an example. So he says that 2/3 of the narrations there were actually narrated only by 17 companions. So even when sometimes people go out of their way to prove every single companion's trustworthiness, and while we agree with that, we say it's not necessary. Like you don't need to go through all that trouble, basically. And many of the narrations from the companions who only narrated one hadith are weak or fabricated. So if you look at the chain of narration, it's not the companion himself, but the people who came after the companion. Looking at that chain, the scholars have determined that the chains are either weak or fabricated. So we don't have to worry about those either. Okay? And we'll go over what weak and fabricated means after. And then most of the hadith narrated by companions who only narrated one hadith have other hadith corroborating them. So you have other hadith with the same meaning. Okay? So it just simplifies it a little bit. So that's not overwhelming. It's like, oh, how do you trust any companion? Well, most of the hadith were narrated by companions that are very well known. Like, religious aspect, what is the most authentic hadith that reached us? Anyone know? What is the most quote unquote authentic? And by that I mean, what is the hadith that has been most massively transmitted? And the one who can answer this question is pretty good. Anyone know? Guess. Which hadith has the most companions narrating it? Okay, the Prophet ﷺ says, "من كذب علي متعمدا فليتبوأ مقعده من النار." Whoever lies about me on purpose, then let them await their seat in the hellfire. Where he says, "إن كذبا علي ليس ككذب على أحد." Lying about me is not lying about anyone else. Whoever lies about me on purpose, من كذب علي متعمدا, because in Arabic, الكذب in Arabic could also mean يعني making a mistake. So the Prophet makes it very clear, whoever lies about me on purpose, let them await their seat in the hellfire. This hadith was narrated by over 70 companions. And some say 72, some say even more. And this is the only hadith that all the 10 companions promised Jannah. All of them narrated this hadith. So this hadith was, and what this tells you is that this was very, very important for the companions. And this ties back to the concept of the religious aspects. And they were very fearful of withholding knowledge, and they were very fearful of lying about the Prophet ﷺ. And imagine what they would do if they saw someone doing that. And social aspect, I mentioned they wouldn't lie. The Arabs, and lying was heavily shunned. This is why you see for example, the hadith of Abu Sufyan, when he went and Heracles, the ruler of the Romans, he asked him, he questions about Muhammad ﷺ, and he said, I was too scared of lying because then my people would know that they would label me as a liar, even though he had every motivation to lie about the Prophet ﷺ. And then there's clear Quranic texts. We went over that. What about memorization? So we talked about their truthfulness. Now we talk about the memorizations. We mentioned some of these. The companions narrated a small fraction of what they heard. So they only narrated when they were sure that this hadith is authentic. Or they were sure that, they only narrated a hadith that they were sure they remembered properly. So anything they were not sure about, they would not narrate. For example, Ibn Mas'ud, I mentioned how he's very cautious. Even when he narrates a hadith, you say, "Oh, نحو من ذلك," like something like that, something close to that. And many use their own wording rather than attributing it to the Prophet ﷺ. So they will just, if it's a hadith about a ruling, or if it's a hadith about something aqidah related, like the unseen, the ghaib, or any other thing. I mentioned rulings and ghaib because this is when you know that the companion, and he heard it from the Prophet. Generally, a lot of the companions, they would give rulings, but they would not connect them to the Prophet ﷺ because they didn't want to misquote the Prophet ﷺ. But then how do we know that the Prophet said this? Because we compare that with narrations from other companions. So one companion may not attribute it, the other one would. So you know that this companion, he got this from the Prophet ﷺ. But then any matter of rulings and any matter of aqidah, like something that a human mind could not possibly conceive, even if the companion doesn't attribute it to the Prophet, you know that he got it from the Prophet because he wouldn't make that up. And there were lots of sayings and athar of the companions were attributed, and the companions did make mistakes. Okay, we mentioned that. So we got to, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, we said the main mode of transmission was memory, was oral transmission. Some companions would write, Abdullah ibn Amr, this is review. Did the Prophet ﷺ really prohibit the companions from writing? I mentioned the hadith. So we know that he allowed Abdullah ibn Amr and Abi Shah. And there's even a narration that Ali ibn Abi Talib had a few narrations written down in his household. And there's many other many other examples. Actually, Dr. Muhammad Mustafa al-A'zami, he's a Pakistani scholar, studied in Deoband, then Azhar, then Cambridge. He did his PhD in Cambridge. Then he was a professor in Saudi. So mashallah, he's been all over the place. His PhD dissertation in the University of Cambridge was about the history of, I have it here actually, studies in early hadith literature. دراسات في السنة النبوية وتاريخ تدوينها. It's been translated. I have the page here. He actually traced all the writings that he could find from the time of the companions. All these companions had writings of hadith in one way, shape, or form. Some had a lot, some had few. So this just shows that writing was widespread even during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, even though most companions did not rely on it. Like, what about the hadith? The Prophet said, "Do not write after me." The scholars, they comment, they said that this was specific to writing a hadith during the time of revelation. So that's one possibility. So after revelation, because they said that the Prophet was worried that the companions might mistakenly mix up the Quran and the hadith, because it hasn't been fully revealed. And if they don't have a book, like this is the Mus'haf, 604 pages, starts with Fatiha, ends with Surah An-Nas. All that stuff happened at the very end. So the Prophet ﷺ, they say a possibility was he didn't want them to be mixed up, the Quran and the Sunnah. Another one says that this was specifically against writing Quranic text alongside non-Quranic texts, like on the same page. Another one is, specific to ones who would rely on text at the expense of memory. So he didn't want people just relying on text. And the fourth opinion is that, it might have been abrogated near the end of Revelation, because you know that Abu Shah, the hadith where he was, the Prophet told him to write for him, that was during the farewell pilgrimage. So it's the very end, in the 10th year of Hijrah. So these are some of the opinions. And of course, you know that this is one hadith. We have a lot more hadith of companions actually writing the Sunnah. Yes, Murad.
Just like course of Umar and Abu Bakr and all, like they wouldn't allow for this practice to be like circulated. The companions knew that the person didn't really want it.
Exactly, yeah. The Khulafa, they would not allow something the Prophet clearly prohibited from spreading. That's a very good point. And then some of the Salaf actually would destroy their books out of fear of them falling in the hands of people without knowledge. So Al-Awza'i is the scholar of Sham. So Al-Awza'i had a madhab. Now we have the four madhab today. There were a lot more than four madhab at the time. So Al-Awza'i, he actually died in Beirut. Al-Awza'i, he said, كان هذا العلم كريما تتلاقاه الرجال بينهم فلما دخل في الكتب دخل فيه غير أهله. Again, thanks to ChatGPT for the translation. He said this knowledge was noble, shared only among distinguished men, but once it entered the books, it was embraced by those who were not its rightful inheritors. So sometimes not all knowledge you want to be widespread, because people might misunderstand, people might misinterpret. And there's a lot of hadith that are seemingly contradictory. And this is a whole branch of hadith sciences. It's called مختلف الحديث. Imam al-Shafi'i has a book called اختلاف الحديث on how to deal with this. Like hadith that are seemingly contradicting. So parts of knowledge you do not want to spread to the masses because it will cause confusion, because they don't have the tools to deal with it. Yes. Oh, his knowledge, their knowledge? Okay. So their knowledge would mainly be spread through their students. So they had students and they would teach their students. Some scholars would command for their books to be burned out of any sincerity as well. Like they're worried about their sincerity. They don't want to be, on the day of judgment, they don't want to be from those whom Allah says, you sought knowledge just so that you be called a scholar. So some of that did that for that, but no, their knowledge was not completely lost. Some of it was, it depends on the students, like how good were their students. But even then, the primary mode of transmission of knowledge in general was oral, it was not written at that point. And then Tha'lab is a very famous scholar of the Arabic language. He says, إذا أردت أن تكون عالما فاكسر القلم. If you want to be a scholar, break the pen. It's a very nice quote. Yeah. And then I mentioned this. Focusing on writing versus memory undermines the most important aspect, which is the critical authority governing transmission, irrespective of its media. You could write all you want, but it could still be fabricated. And just the fact that it was written on a book doesn't make it authentic. It's more about the process. Yes. Oh, ثعلب. إذا أردت أن تكون عالما فاكسر القلم. Like, don't just rely on books. Like, you know the famous story of Al-Ghazali, right? You know the famous story of Ghazali? Imam Al-Ghazali, he had a lot of his knowledge was in his books. And he'd write everything. Imam Ghazali, by the way, he died 505. So this is way after. Like during his time, everyone would write. And then they were stopped by highway robbers and they stole everything. And Al-Ghazali told the robber, he's like, you have something that is worthless to you, but it's worth everything to me. And he told him what? He's like, these books contain all my knowledge. And the robber laughed at him and he said, what kind of knowledge is this if you don't have it? It's in your books. Yeah, I mean, you could have thousands of books at home, but if you're not able to recollect that information, then it's useless. Does that help? Yeah. Yes, don't overly rely. And actually, A lot of the, yes, we mentioned how the writing was there. Like people used to write, but many companions and many tabi'een would actually frown upon writing. Like you should not write, you should memorize because this is a proper way. But of course, afterwards, writing was widely accepted. They're just hardcore. Yeah, there's no religious ruling prohibiting writing or anything. Like women narrators from the companions. So there's more women narrators in this generation than any following one. Can someone guess actually? I don't think you'll get that because like why would you know that? But how many women companions were there? Like I didn't know until I ballpark, yeah. You know how we would guess the dates in the carnival? Like guess how many how many companions narrated the hadith that reached us? Yeah. 12? 150? He's closer than you. طيب. Okay, what? Okay, there was 129. I was just say that. 129. Why is that? Like, why were there more women companions, or why were there more women narrators in the companion طبقة? I don't know, in the companion level than any other level after? Why were there more women companions in that level than any other level that came after? Like more than the tabi'een, more than atba' tabi'een. Why? Sorry? Like, yeah, in the generation of the companions. You know how each hadith, like Bukhari, would narrate from, I don't know, like Abdullah bin Maslam al-Qa'nabi, عن Malik. So Malik is tabi'. He's not a tabi'. And then he would narrate from, I don't know, like Nafi', who's a tabi'i, who would narrate from a companion. So the first generation, that generation of the companions has the most women out of all the other narrations. Yes. They had access to the mahats. Okay. Any other sisters, maybe? Guess. Sorry? Not enough women narrating? No. In this halaqah? No. Okay, I'll tell you. So a lot of the narrations from the woman, who would narrate from a woman at that point? Usually. No. Like a woman is narrating. Who would narrate her hadith? Because women like are not gonna go like Abu Huraira and stand in front of the Muslims in Jum'ah and start narrating a hadith. Most of the people who narrated from the women companions were from their household, their sons, their nephews, their siblings. Well, mostly nephews, because their sibling would just narrate from the Prophet. But you had a lot of people narrating from their household. And then in the generations that came after, you had those circles of knowledge in the masajid. So all the knowledge that was from these female companions, it reached their household members, and their household members transmitted it to the masses. Basically what I said. Oh, and slaves as well. They had slaves at that time. Aisha, the scholar of the companions. I don't know why I did this. I think this is a mistake. It should all show up at once. Anyways, it's not surprising that she is the woman with the most narrations. She's the wife of the Prophet, most beloved person. She married the Prophet when she was very young. She died late, 57 after Hijrah. Oh, I remember why I wanted you to guess who her star pupils were, but it's okay. She had lots of students. Her three most prominent students, or the people who narrated from her, were Urwa ibn Zubayr, Al-Qasim bin Muhammad, and Amra bint Abdul Rahman. Anything special about these three, by the way? Yes. Cousin, not cousin, nephew. What about Al-Qasim? Al-Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr as-Siddiq. He's also her nephew. So Urwa ibn Zubayr, who's his mother? Asma bint Abi Bakr. And his father is Zubayr bin Awam. So Urwa, by the way, is a tabi'i. Even though his father is Zubayr, and his brother, Abdullah ibn Zubayr is a companion. Urwa is younger, so he's a tabi'i. He was born after the Prophet ﷺ died. That's why he lived so late. يعني he died so late. So Urwa and Al-Qasim bin Muhammad were the nephews of Aisha radiallahu anha. They're so lucky. And Amra bint Abd al-Rahman, I believe she was born about 28 after Hijrah. She grew up in the household of Aisha. And Amra bint Abd al-Rahman, she's actually, so she's also tabi'iyya. So she's a tabi'i woman, a narrator. No, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, the brother of Aisha. Yeah. Okay. And Urwa ibn Zubair has a famous quote. He said, if Aisha were to die today, I would not feel sad about any piece of knowledge that I missed from her. Like he basically says, like everything that Aisha knew, she taught me. So the knowledge of Aisha, alhamdulillah, reached us through Urwa ibn Zubair. Urwa ibn Zubair was Madani. So Urwa ibn Zubair, so if you look at the chain of knowledge, not just hadith, even fiqh, like the chain of knowledge, Aisha taught everything she knew to Urwa. And then Urwa is one of the scholars, one of the 7 fuqaha of Medina. So Medina had 7 scholars from the tabi'een who basically had compiled the knowledge of Medina or of the people of Medina, and that knowledge slowly found its way to Imam Malik. That's one of the, we mentioned how we got to where we are in Bukhari. Imam Malik also has al-Muwatta. So that's how we got the knowledge of Aisha to the Muwatta of Imam Malik. And Aisha radiallahu anha, back to her, she did not stop at religious sciences. She excelled in genealogy, ilm al-ansab, like the science of knowing the family trees, and I don't know. This is very important. And the Arabs, like knowing the different tribes and their ancestries, history, medicine, language, poetry. She's a proper polymath. May Allah be pleased with Aisha radiallahu anha. Yeah. So the concept of isnad. What is the sanad? You know how a hadith is split into a matan and a sanad. And for the interest of time, I'll go quick because we don't have much time. The matan of the hadith is the actual text, the actual content of the hadith, the actual saying of the Prophet ﷺ. The sanad is the chain of narrators through which we received that hadith. So this concept of isnad developed organically out of necessity. Of course, during the time of the companions, the chain of narration would just be one person, which is the companion. So that was not really something that they thought about. But then, as time passed, you started having to reach the Prophet ﷺ, you started to have at least one person, and then became 2 and became 3. So you had to, so the concept of isnad, of the sanad, it became something that they started to think about more. And it began at different times in different places, depending on when it was needed in each place. Some tabi'een would not pay much attention to attributing their narrations to the Prophet ﷺ. So their hadith would be called mursala. A hadith mursal is a hadith where you have, we said Urwa bin Zubair. Urwa bin Zubair, we said, is a tabi'i, so he never met the Prophet. So when Urwa says, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there's something missing in the chain. Although I don't know if Urwa had marasil. You can say Abdullah Sa'id al-Musayyib. Think of any tabi'i. So if a tabi'i immediately says the Prophet ﷺ said, you know that at least the companion has been dropped. We don't know who else was dropped. Maybe there is another tabi'i that he dropped his name as well. So at least the companion is missing, because a common misdefinition is sometimes they say hadith mursal is when a tabi'i drops a sahabi. That's not very accurate, because he could drop more than just a sahabi. So a lot of the companions, a lot of the tabi'in at the time, they didn't pay much attention to accurately or correct attributing the hadith to the Prophet ﷺ. They were more interested in spreading the actual matan of the hadith, the actual hadith text. An example of that, Al-Hasan al-Basri. Al-Hasan al-Basri obviously is from Basra. It's called Hasan al-Basri. He wouldn't connect many of his narrations. Muhammad ibn Sirin, on the other hand, would. So Muhammad ibn Sirin, he was very keen. Muhammad, what is the most famous statement of Muhammad ibn Sirin? Anyone know? Yes. إن هذا العلم دين فانظروا عمن تأخذون دينكم. This matter, this knowledge, this is the religion, so be careful who you take your religion from. So Ibn Sirin was very, very, very keen, very careful of who to take hadith from. And he is one of the very earliest tabi'een, very earliest people who actually started to focus on the narrations, on the different narrations. And of course, you will find that Ibn Sirin was in Basra, right? So you'll see why, and his students, through Ayyub al-Sikhtiyani, through Shu'ab al-Hajjaj, you'll find that his students became the pioneers in the science of, it's called al-Jarh wa-Ta'dil, or Ilm al-Rijal, like the science of critiquing men, critiquing the narrators of Hadith. That science blossomed in Basra, and the pioneer in that was Muhammad bin Sirin, rahimahullah. And I know this is a tangent, but I think you guys will love this story. It's not very long, but does anyone, I don't know if you guys know the story, but Khalid ibn Walid, during the conquests of Iraq and Sham, he, I think it's called Deir al-Balah. And during his conquests, he came across a church. And in the basement of that church, he found children who were being groomed to become missionaries. So they're memorizing the Injil, the Bible, and they're going to be missionaries, like clergymen. I don't know. And basically, their lives, they're meant to be I don't know, clergymen, let's say, or missionaries. And so he sent those kids, and 5 of them, and he sent them to I think Iraq, and one of them was Sirin, the father of Muhammad bin Sirin, and the father of Hafsa bint Sirin. Hafsa bint Sirin was a tabi'iyya. She is very famous for her knowledge and for her worship. And in some narrations, they say Hafsa bint Sirin is more knowledgeable than Al-Hasan al-Basri. So that's one. The other one, Nusayr. Who's the son of Nusayr? Musa bin Nusayr. Who's Musa bin Nusayr? He led the conquests of North Africa. So the North Africans, they have Musa bin Nusayr to thank after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, for their Islam. Another one, Yasar. Who's the son of Yasar? Ishaq. Who's the son of Ishaq? Muhammad. Muhammad bin Ishaq bin Yasar, the author of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, or the compiler of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And just imagine, it's crazy. These children, there's some basement, like locked up in a basement, literally. And through the Islamic conquests, they gave birth to icons, to legends, to people that benefited Islam greatly. And it's just very inspiring. I know it's off topic, but I had to mention that. So I find that story very beautiful. Anyways, back to the topic. So Isnad, lying, you mentioned lying, right? Lying did not become rampant until the fitna of Al-Mukhtar bin Ubaydillah al-Thaqafi. So Al-Mukhtar bin Ubaydillah al-Thaqafi was in Kufa. He claimed revelation, and he claimed knowledge of the unseen. This is mentioned in Sir Alam al-Nubala by Dhahabi. He empowered the Shia. The Shia, by the way, I have to make a distinction. The Shia at that time were not the Shia of today. It was more of a political movement. I have to make that clear. Just the Shia, like when you see Shia in the first 1 or 2 centuries, it's not the same as the Shia of today. You have to keep that in context. Keep that context in mind. Anyways, Al-Mukhtar bin Ubaydillah al-Thaqafi, he began lying about the Prophet ﷺ and commanding his followers to do the same. So after the tabi'een, the companions of the tabi'een saw that, they became a lot more cautious about narrations. And overall, the fitna of Al-Mukhtar had a positive effect because it accelerated the development of the critical authority governing hadith transmission. I know it feels like I'm reading the slide, but I literally wrote that from my head. So it's basically reading my thoughts. Yes. This is during the Umayyad dynasty. So the Umayyad dynasty quashed Ubaydillah al-Thaqafi. Yes. Which Thaqafi?
So that's someone else. There was someone else that came from the dynasty.
Yeah, different guy. Yes. Yeah, question? To be honest, I'm not sure what the nature of the lies were, but I would imagine they're like to further his agenda. Did he slander the Prophet? I don't know. I have to be careful. Like the Dhahabi and the books didn't mention what exactly where the lies were. However, a lot of the people who claim prophethood, because the Quran says there's not going to be any prophet after, and the Prophet says there's not going to be a prophet after me. So I would imagine the lies will be in the nature of, kind of elaborating on that, contradicting that. Like he wants to have some legitimacy. Allah knows best. I'm not sure, to be honest. طيب. Hadith authorities from the companions. I need to gloss over this quickly because we don't have much time. So during the early time, Umar ibn Khattab was very strict. I think Murad mentioned how if something the Prophet ﷺ prohibited, there's no way Abu Bakr and Umar would let people do it. So Umar was very strict about narrating hadith. Umar was very, very cautious. He actually held a few people. He saw some of the companions were narrating a lot of hadith. So he kind of, and حبسهم could mean that he prevented them from narrating, or it could also mean that he actually held them in Medina until his death. Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, he said, إياكم والأحاديث إلا أحاديثا في عهد عمر فإنه كان يخيف الله الناس في الله عز وجل. Like, be watchful of ahadith, except ahadith in the time of Umar, because Umar would scare people for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Umar was the earliest, I guess, authority. There's many. I'm just mentioning names. I'm mentioning the most famous name in each stage. It's not that there's only one person doing this. Aisha radiallahu anha, we mentioned that she died in the year 57. She was the leading authority in hadith critique. She even corrected earlier companions, starting with Umar radiallahu anhu himself. She corrected Umar on 8 ahadith that we know of. The hadith of the dead believer, we said, Umar said that the dead believer, not Umar said, astaghfirullah, Umar narrated that the Prophet said that the dead believer would be punished by the families crying over them. Aisha corrected him. She said, no, the dead disbeliever, not the dead believer. So, Aisha, Umar, as scary as he was, if Aisha had no problem correcting him, you can imagine who else she would correct. So she corrected Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Abu Huraira, and many other companions. And she would always say something like, أما إنه لم يكذب ولكنه نسي وأخطأ. أو إنكم لا ما حدثتموني عن كذابين. Like, she would always say, I know they are not lying, but perhaps they forgot or they made a mistake. And I mentioned here the source. This is the source of, for the numbers 11, 9, 7, 8. Imam al-Zarkashi. Imam al-Zarkashi, by the way, was a student of Imam Ibn Kathir, the scholar of tafsir. So he's also Shafi'i. Ibn Kathir was Dimashqi. He's in Egypt, but he studied under Ibn Kathir. And he has a book about specifically al-ijaba li-irad mastadrakathu Aisha al-Sahaba. He has a book specifically about Aisha's corrections of the other companions. That's how in depth the scholars went. And just to, again, further emphasize how stringent the process of hadith verification was. After the death of Aisha radiallahu anha, I mentioned 60 to 93 because 93 is the year Anas died. And Anas was the last big companion of the scholars to die. So Ibn Umar was also, and he took on that mantle. And even at this stage, some of the tabi'een started correcting companions, because a lot of the companions at this stage, they were young when the Prophet ﷺ died. So, I'm kind of answering the question at the end. Like, the tabi'een would have debates with Ibn Abbas more than many other companions. Why? The reason is because Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet died, he was 13 years old. So Ibn Abbas was seeking knowledge around the same time as the tabi'een themselves. So yes, he was a companion, but a lot of them saw him more also as a like a classmate or like a contemporary. And this is, of course, not to take anything away from him. Ibn Abbas was among the biggest scholars of the companions. Anyways, these are some of the notable. I don't want to, if you guys, I don't want to confuse you with names, but these are. I can share the slides if you want. But these are some of the most prominent names of tabi'een who would correct companions. Dispelling common doubt. Many Orientalists claim that some companions or hadith scholars fabricated certain hadith for political or social reasons. We mentioned, I think I mentioned this in the beginning, like the companions, scholars here meaning scholars, the companions and the tabi'een, they had no issue correcting even Umar ibn Khattab himself, who was the authority. Okay, so if they were that comfortable correcting the likes of even Umar himself, then how would you think they would act if someone steps out of line in favor of the government? Highly unlikely that would happen. The companions and scholars were very selective of who they took hadith from. The hypocrites were well known. I mentioned that. For more proofs, this is a book, As-Sunnah wa Makanatuha fi Tashri' al-Islami. This is a book. Mustafa al-Sibai was a Syrian scholar. He studied in Azhar, and he wrote a very famous, very, very, very good book defending the Sunnah and its authority. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about it because that's the topic for next week. The book has been translated. The translation is very good. You can get it from Habib Bookstore. You can get it from Google. This is the book. It's got, alhamdulillah, it's not very short, but it's a very, very good book. Highly recommend this book. Okay. Next. Okay, so we went over the time of the companions themselves. Like, what happened after the Anas bin Malik died? What happened after the scholars, the companions died? Now, the tabi'een were the ones responsible for, I guess, the governance of hadith transmission. There's no, at this point, everyone who met or saw or narrated from the Prophet ﷺ died. So 3 cities became the centers of knowledge. What were the 3 cities? Guess. Not Murad. Sorry? Damascus? No. No, not Damascus. I didn't mean to laugh. Sorry. It was Medina, Baghdad. No, Baghdad. Okay, yes. Medina, Kufa, and Basra. You got it. Yes. Baghdad did not exist. Believe it or not, Baghdad did not exist at this point. Does anyone know when Baghdad was established? No, like did not exist. It was not a city. Baghdad was, yes. Oh, it's something in the comments. Golden Age of Islam, yes. Baghdad was established by Abu Ja'far al-Mansur in the year 146 after Hijrah. Otherwise, Abu Hanifa would have been Baghdadi. I'm joking. No, yeah, so I'll talk about Damascus. But yeah, Baghdad did not exist. Actually, Basra and Kufa did not exist before Islam. All these cities were new. Damascus is way more ancient, alhamdulillah. And Mosul is ancient. Iraq has ancient cities, just not Baghdad, not Kufa, not Basra. Actually, the reason why they became beacons of knowledge has to do with the fact that they were newly established. So we mentioned that. Yes. So why did these certain cities excel over others? The eagerness of the companions to spread their knowledge. So the Khalif Umar al-Khattab, and he would send different scholars to different amsar, to different cities to spread the knowledge of Islam. They will be the ambassadors of Islam because a lot of these newly conquered areas, their inhabitants, yes, sure, they're Muslim, but they barely know anything about Islam. They've just been introduced to it. There's no internet, there's no Sheikh Google, there's no ChatGPT. They need someone teaching them. Okay, that was a lame joke. And so that's one aspect. Then who was sent? Because not all the companions were equal in the level of knowledge, and not all cities got an equal share of knowledgeable companions. The second is the eagerness of the tabi'een to learn from the companions. Large difference between the major tabi'een of Kufa and Sham. This was mentioned. The tabi'een of Kufa were, mashallah, very, very keen on seeking knowledge. The tabi'een of Sham were very, very keen on zuhd and worship. They were very righteous, but they were not as keen on seeking knowledge and from their companions. Like Abu Darda went to Sham, but it wasn't there wasn't as much reception, I guess, as you had in the likes of Basra and Kufa. And this had to do with the nature of the people living in those cities. I mentioned they're newly established. So it has to do with the type of people that actually moved to those areas. And some cities didn't receive as many major companions like Egypt and Yemen. Among the 7, okay, we mentioned this, 5 of the 7 companions that narrated over 1,000 hadith actually stayed in Medina. So there's no confusion why Medina is one of the cities where the hadith where hadith thrived. Like I think I'm going to skip this for the interest of time. Abu Huraira, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. By the way, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, I know I said I'll skip, but Sa'id al-Musayyib is the son-in-law of Abu Huraira, first and foremost. He married his daughter. He often corrected tabi'in. He's a strong critic of the Umayyad leadership. There's actually a very funny story. The Umayyad Khalifa, he went to Medina and he was resting, and he told his guard, he's like, go and fetch me a scholar so he can narrate hadith to me. So he goes and he sees Ibn al-Musayyib in his halaqah teaching his students, and he tells them, he goes and he like, I don't know, like kind of like makes that motion, like come, and he just ignores him. And this guy's like, what is wrong with this guy? Like, I'm with the Khalifa. So then he goes to him and he tells him, come to, the Khalifa wants, requests that you come and, I guess, give him a private lesson. He's like, if the Khalifa wants a private lesson, he should come to me. And the guy was like, is this guy crazy? So he goes back to the Khalifa and he tells him, and he's like, oh, he must have met Sa'id ibn Musayyib. So he's very well known for this. And Sa'id ibn Musayyib, by the way, is many of the scholars, they mention that he's the best of the tabi'een. Like Imam Ahmad, he puts him as the best of the tabi'een. He's definitely the best of the tabi'een of Medina. And some say he's the best tabi'i, period. So Sa'id ibn Musayyib is a very, very, very big scholar, and he's the one through which the knowledge of Abu Huraira was transmitted, for the most part. Of course, the other ones, Abu Salama bin Abdurrahman bin Auf, this is the son of Abdurrahman bin Auf. Abu Salih al-Samman, Samman from Samna, like ghee, he would bring oil and ghee to Kufa. So Abu Salih al-Samman was both in Medina and in Kufa. Al-A'raj was one of the scholars of Malik. Anyways, many people narrate from Abu Huraira, obviously. Ibn Umar, same deal. The most famous two are Nafi', the Mawla, the freed slave of Ibn Umar, and Salim bin Umar. So the son of Umar al-Khattab and his freed slave. And Nafi', so Malik and Nafi' and Ibn Umar, it's considered a golden narration. We have the concept of golden narrations. Like if you have these narrations, the likelihood of them being, this is the most authentic narration you can get. Malik narrating from Nafi', narrating from Ibn Umar, narrating from the Prophet ﷺ, of course. There's a few golden narrations. This is one of them. I mentioned this, actually. Nafi' and Abdullah Abdullah bin Dinar and Nafi' and Mawla of Ibn Umar. Muwatta narrated, Malik directly narrated from them and put their narrations in his book Al-Muwatta. And Salim, of course, he died a bit earlier, so he needed Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri in between. Aisha, he had her nephews, and Amra, we know this. Kufa, I mentioned Kufa was established 17 after the year 17 after Hijrah. So during the time of Umar al-Khattab, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, he said that 300 of the people of the tree, Ashab al-Shajara, the people who made the bay'ah in Hudaybiyah to go fight until death. This is in Hudaybiyah. 300 of those people whom Allah says, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, Allah is pleased with the believers who gave the covenant under the tree. 300 of them landed in Kufa among 70 of the people of Badr. And Umar had a great interest in Kufa. He even sent to them Ammar bin Yasir ibn Mas'ud. Ibn Mas'ud, the four Abdullahs, Ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas, Ibn Umar, Ibn Amr. Ibn Mas'ud is ranked the highest. This is why sometimes in narrations when you see قال Abdullah, without saying Abdullah bin who, it's Abdullah bin Mas'ud, because he's ranked highest. Oh, okay. Are there narrators that people would differ on their strength and weakness? Yes, many, lots. And this has many different, because, I'm sorry? Based on what? Based on the strength of their narration. So they would compare their narrations. So for example, I'll get to you. I'll get to your question. I promise I'll get to it. Because we'll get to this. I know we're running out of time, so I'll have to speed it up. Ibn Mas'ud produced lots of notable students, made Kufa rival Medina. Ibn Sirin al-Basri, he said, I entered Kufa, I saw 4,000 Hadith students, and 400 of them faqhu. He reached a high level of understanding. Ibn Hazm, he would even rank the Kufi Tabi'i over his Madani. I see why Murad took a screenshot of this. The Hanafis like this, huh? Kufa became the home of the best of the Arab tribes. Umar al-Khattab even insisted that Nakha as an Arab tribe, they really wanted to go to Sham. Umar said, no, go to Kufa. إني أرى الشرف فيكم, I see honor seated amongst you. Focus on Iraq and the masses of Persia. And many Nakha'is became great scholars. The most notable is Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. Ibrahim al-Nakha'i, if you study the history of the Hanafi madhab, Ibrahim al-Nakha'i is the most notable name before Abu Hanifa. Okay, and then the most notable students of Ibn Mas'ud, Alqama bin Qais al-Nakha'i, Aswad bin Yazid al-Nakha'i. You see the Nakha'is again. طبعا Ibrahim is a tabi. He never met Ibn Mas'ud, so he got his knowledge through these other students. Ali was also in Kufa, and I think this maybe answers the question that the sister asked in the beginning, which is how come the Khulafa didn't narrate as much hadith? They're busy in conquests, politics. This is why Ali, as knowledgeable as he was, he didn't have as much time as Ibn Mas'ud to teach. And also, there's lots of fabrications about Ali radiallahu anhu for obvious reasons, unfortunately. Basra, established 14 after Hijrah. The most notable companion in Basra was Anas bin Malik. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Imran bin Husayn, they focused on other things. They died earlier. Anas bin Malik, we mentioned he died 93. So he lived in Basra for about 76 years, had many students. Let's skip this because we need to get to the next stage. Certain cities had more action than others. Okay, we mentioned all this. We don't need this. After the death of the Tabi'in. So now the Tabi'in have all died. Now we're relying on their students. We're one name down, further down the chain. So the companions who died earlier, like Aisha and Abu Huraira. By the way, okay, I think I didn't mention this. Who's a Tabi'i? What's a Tabi'i? Yes, a Tabi'i is a person who met the companions but did not meet the Prophet. Okay, so he met the companion but did not meet the Prophet. And if a Tabi'i, and sometimes it's possible for someone to meet a companion and not meet the Prophet, even though they lived during the time of the Prophet. And those people are called Mukhadram. There's a specific term for someone who lived during the time of the Prophet, but only met the companions. Mukhadram, I don't know. Like Najashi Mukhadram. He met the companions, didn't meet the Prophet. So the companions who died a bit earlier, so like Aisha and Abu Huraira, the narrations from them came through older Tabi'in to younger Tabi'in. The younger Tabi'in, they did not get to live through their period. So there's one extra name. And you'll see that. I'll show you the chain of narrations from Ibn Mas'ud, for example. You'll find that it's a bit longer because he died early. And the ones who died later, like Anas, or Ibn Umar, like Malik and Nafi' and Ibn Umar. Very easy because Nafi' lived a long life and Ibn Umar lived a long life. So you have shorter chains. Like the reason I mentioned this is because we were talking about Bukhari. Bukhari is just a book of compilation. Like this person narrates from this person, narrates from this person, narrates from the companion. So it just shows us like how we got those chains. طيب علي بن المديني, he said نظرت فإذا الإسناد يدور على 6. He said Ali ibn al-Madini is also from Basra, by the way, and he is a teacher of Imam al-Bukhari. He said, I looked and I found that the chains of transmission revolve around 6 people. For the people of Medina, they have Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. And for the people of Mecca, they have Amr bin Dinar. And for the people of Basra, they have Qatada bin Di'am al-Sadusi and Yahya bin Abi Kathir. And the people of Kufa have Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i and Sulaiman bin Mahran, aka al-A'mash. I think many of you, these names will be new to you, and that's fine. It just shows that he's saying that a lot of these individuals, you'll find that most of the narrations go through them. That doesn't mean that the hadith that they narrate only go through them, but that the most authentic narrations go through them. And it makes it easier for us to study the development of chains. So this is Zuhri. I apologize, this is in Arabic. I'll translate. So Zuhri is a teacher of Imam Malik, by the way. So Zuhri, you'll find here that these are the companions. So Anas bin Malik, Abu Huraira, Abdullah bin Umar, Aisha, Abdullah bin Abbas, he narrates from all of them. How does he get to them? Zuhri died which year? 124. Anas died 93. So Zuhri met Anas. He was able to narrate directly from Anas. Abu Huraira died the year 57. So did Aisha. So he needs someone in between. So these are the students of Abu Huraira that Zuhri got to Abu Huraira through. Sa'id ibn Musayyib, Abu Salama bin Abdurrahman bin Auf, Al-A'raj. We mentioned these names. Aisha, Urwa ibn Zubayr, Abu Salama bin Abdurrahman bin Auf, Amr bin Abdurrahman. Again, we mentioned this. We also mentioned Al-Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. It's not mentioned here. So you see there's a name in between because they died early. Abdullah bin Abbas had to reach him through a student. Okay, after Zuhri, now we reach the next stage. Because Bukhari and Muslim and all these guys, they're down here. Bukhari died 256, Zuhri died 124. So you have all all of these names in between them. The most notable is Imam Malik. Why is he notable? Because Imam Malik, he wrote his book in Muwatta, and we have in Muwatta. And it's one of the 9 major compilations of Hadith. So he narrates directly from Zuhri. Sufyan bin Uyayna is the scholar of Mecca. He's the same level of Imam Malik, but he's in Mecca. Again, I don't want to delve too much into the names. If you start studying the science of Hadith and Hadith narrations, a lot of these names will become more familiar to you. But this just shows, this is Bukhari, this is Muslim, this is Nasa'i, this is Ibn Majah. This is how, this is a typical map of how a Hadith would reach Bukhari. So right now we're in the middle stage. As you can tell, we probably won't be able to finish. But this is Az-Zuhri. Az-Zuhri, we said it was in Medina. Al-A'mash is in Kufa. See how we mentioned Abdullah Mas'ud died early? There's 2 names. One name is not sufficient. Because he died so early, so you have 2 names to get to Abdullah Mas'ud. Anas bin Malik, he died late. So there's literally no names. It's just Qatada himself. Just shows the example. So this is Basra. This is the chain of Basra. This is the chain of Kufa. This is the chain of Medina. There's many more, but this is the most famous chain. Again, if you look at the books of Hadith, and if you look at the Hadith, you'll find a lot of these. Al-Bukhari, عن Hakam bin Nafi', عن Shu'ayb, عن Az-Zuhri, عن Salim, عن Abdullah bin Umar. This is one chain of narration you'll find in Bukhari. Right. So in this, we mentioned how transmission before this was mainly oral. Now we transition to writing. So in the second quarter of the 2nd century, books began to be written in not just hadith, but fiqh, hadith, and tafsir. All these. Again, I'll give you the slides so that I don't have to go over each one of them. You have, of course, Abu Hanifa, Malik, and many others. Ibn Ishaq, the Sirah. I'll skip this because interest of time. Why compile? Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, again, Ibn Hajar is known for writing, and he's a very well-known scholar of Islamic sciences, but his most well-known work is the commentary of Sahih al-Bukhari. He says that the main reasons that he cites for compiling is widespread literacy. People can now read and write. Scholars spreading among the different cities, and the development of bid'ah and innovations. So now you have innovations, people started to have to compile refutations. And because Islam started to spread, you needed ways to quickly spread those refutations. Another very, very important piece of information is that paper manufacturing actually entered the Muslim world in the early 2nd century. And this happened after the conquest of Samarkand. Samarkand is in Uzbekistan. When the Muslims conquered that city, this was the first Muslim city to manufacture paper. So then paper began to enter Muslim cities through merchants, and scholars started to utilize it in the mid-2nd century, and it had a huge effect in increasing book production, not just in hadith, but in all the sciences. Most important book is Muwatta. Al-Muwatta was authored by the top scholar of Medina, the Malik bin Anas al-Shafi'i. At that time, he said, there's not a book on the face of this earth after the book of Allah more authentic than the book of Malik. And this is, of course, before the compilation of Bukhari and Muslim and many of the other Sihah, because they're more authentic. There's a lot of stuff that I can mention about Muwatta that I will very, very unfortunately have to skip in the interest of time. But this is the first book of its kind. Actually, it's the first book of its kind that reached us. To reach us, I put that italicized because similar books have been authored at that time period. But as Imam Malik himself said, they asked him, why would you compile a book like this when there's so many other books? And then he looked at them and he said, whatever was written for the sake of Allah will remain, and whatever was not will fade away. And surely enough, they faded away, and Imam Malik's book remained. This is not to say that all of them were not written for the sake of Allah, but Al-Muwatta was just head and shoulders above any other book written at that time, and this is why it became widely adopted. And of course, this is also has to do with the fact that Imam Malik was the head of a fiqh school, and because Imam al-Shafi'i was the biggest proponent of the Maliki school until he established his own school. Imam al-Shafi'i was the star pupil of Imam Malik. Imam al-Muwatta was narrated by over 70 of Imam Malik's students. So even to this day, we have many of Muwatta's narrations. Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi is the most famous one. And that's because Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi was Andalusian. So he moved to the land of the Malikis. So it was widely adopted by the Malikis. And the Malikis, of course, put the most effort into teaching, teaching the Muwatta, even though all the madhahib, the entire Ummah, and the Muwatta is a treasure for the entire Ummah. And you'll find commentaries on Muwatta from all the madhahib. The Suyuti, who is Shafi'i, has a commentary on Muwatta. The Hanafis, I think Zarqani is Hanafi, right? Zarqani is Hanafi? I don't know. The most famous one is by Ibn Abd al-Barr, Tamheed, Imam fi al-Muwatta min al-Ma'ani wal-Asanid and al-Istidhkar. Yani lots and lots and lots. The Muwatta of Imam Malik is among the books that had the most works written about them. Mentioned the elephant story. There's a famous story. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi came all the way from Andalus to hear from Imam Malik in Medina. And there's a very funny story. One day, an elephant came to Medina, and the people were like, "Oh my God, there's an elephant. Let's go see the elephant." So in the Prophet's masjid, Imam Malik was sitting there, and the only person there was Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. And Imam Malik told him, like, "Why didn't you go see the elephant? I don't think you have elephants in Andalus." And he said, "I came to Medina to see Malik, not to see the elephant." So Imam Malik, as you would imagine, he was very impressed by Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Anyways, like, I'm trying to be very Shu'bah ibn al-Hajjaj. Man, we might have to do a part 2 of this. Do we want to do part 2 or do we want to part 2? Are you guys happy with us doing after Maghrib? No, we'll do it another day. Khalas. Guys, there's a lot of content. Are you okay with us doing part 2? Yes? Khalas. Because there's literally, like, what slide are we on? 50. Okay, there's like 25 more slides. I can add more stuff to after. Khalas, you know what? In that case, let's stop here. Anything I said that is correct is from Allah, and that from the blessing of Allah, and any mistake I make is from the shaitan or from my own shortcomings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. Any questions? Let me open the floor for questions. Any question? I know a lot of you were not here when we started, but yes, Murad.
A question that is, I think someone raised it before, but I just want to ask you, like, when it comes to Hadith criticism,
Yeah.
sometimes, like, based on the content of the Hadith, it sounds like what's being said. For example, if I said that, like, Ahmed came in during the Jummah khutbah and said so and so, you would assume that there's a lot of narrators for that. I mean, it's a public setting and it's in a khutbah, for example.
Yeah.
Are there, like, I have Hadith in mind, but are there, like, Hadith criticisms to the extent where you're like, based on the scenario, it doesn't make sense that there's only one narrator for the specific sunnah?
Yeah. Let's look. I mean, the hadith إنما الأعمال بالنيات, the first hadith in Bukhari, is only narrated by Umar ibn Khattab.
But they ask questions like, why is it that despite this being a public setting, despite there being many companions, there's only one narrator?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it didn't reach us. Maybe the companions thought Umar's narration was. Honestly, I would recommend asking that question to Ustaz Sayyid. But there's answers to it. I just don't want to delve into it because it will take some time, and I'm more confident in his ability to answer than mine. Like, I have an answer, but I'd rather he answers. Any other questions? You want to do questions after Iftar? Oh, am I here? Yeah. No. Like, no other questions? Are we good to conclude? طيب خلاص. جزاكم الله خير, everyone. I don't like saying جزاكم الله خير, everyone, because جزاكم, it means everyone. So جزاكم الله خير is sufficient. Guys, I will use this platform to correct a common mistake. You don't need to say جزاك الله خير, everyone. You can say جزاكم الله خير, okay? جزاكم الله خير is a plural. So if you're addressing a crowd, just say جزاكم الله خير. Alhamdulillah, that covers it. Huh? Yeah, and وإياكم is also encompassing of everyone. And also, as a sign of respect, you can say جزاكم الله خير to one person. And that would work. That would be a sign of respect. Oh, actually, I will use this time. There's this hadith, this book called Introduction to Hadith Studies by Farhan Zubairi. It's written in English. It is written for an English audience. It is a short primer on hadith and hadith sciences. It is, I'll be honest with you, if you had access to Arabic, have other recommendations to put on top before this one, but this is a pretty good introduction. Like I would recommend this book, Introduction to Hadith Sciences. You can get it on Amazon, but don't get it on Amazon. Why? Boycott, bro. No, it's also because you can get it elsewhere. But it starts with importance of the Sunnah, ulum al-Hadith, preservation and compilation of Hadith. So it goes over what I went over, but in like much less depth. Hadith literature, so the different kinds of compilations of Hadith, what's the difference between them, Isnad, biographies of Hadith narrators, very short, very brief. And then it goes over Hadith terminology in a very short manner. My sources, I will mention my sources. My sources were in Arabic, unfortunately. The primary source I used was called, it is a contemporary book called Minan Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam ila al-Bukhari. So I got the name of the lecture from it. It is by Dr. Ahmed Sanawbar. He's a professor at the University of 29th of May. Guys, why is 29th of May an important date? 29th of May. What's so special about that date? Huh?
This year?
No, man. Okay, 29th of May is a Gregorian date. Keep that in mind. So it's not going to be something from the time of the Prophet. 29th of May, 1453 is the day Istanbul, Constantinople was conquered. So that's why they have a university in Turkey named 29th of May. So he's a professor there, and mashallah, he wrote a book. Honestly, many of my slides are a summary of his book. I did use other resources. I used Sheikh Ahmed al-Sayyid has Tasheel Ma'rifat al-Asanid. This is a very nice book. It's in Arabic. It's meant to be memorized, by the way. People memorize this. Like this is Abu Huraira and how he got to the people who narrate from Abu Huraira, the people who narrate from Abdullah ibn Umar, the people who narrate from Aisha. It's a very nice resource. He has, okay, 1 minute. Okay. Yeah, and he has also lecture slides. He also has a YouTube playlist as well, introducing this concept. Like that, with that being said, Jazakallah khair. If anyone has any questions after, feel free to ask me. I'll be here. Yeah. May Allah accept our fast in this hour of acceptance. And may Allah make this knowledge a proof for us and not against us, and empower us to act upon it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.